Hormuz traffic is creeping back up. CENTCOM is on Al Arabiya saying Iran's military has been destroyed. And Iranian state media is pushing a U.S. sanctions waiver, all on the same Tuesday. None of those three claims is confirmed by the same source.
This is Iran War Daily. I'm Brian. Cassidy's here. And apparently everybody's winning except the people doing the actual proving.
We've got one named Iranian detainee actually home. Shahab Dalili, a U.S. resident, after more than a decade in custody. And we've got a Tasnim-sourced sanctions waiver claim that Washington hasn't touched. So let's do this the annoying way and check who said what, and to whom.
And I want to know why CENTCOM's victory lap is going to Al Arabiya instead of a U.S. outlet. The audience for that message is the whole point.
Here's France 24.
A total of 55 commodities vessels crossed the strategic waterway between May 11th and 17th, according to data from maritime tracking firm Kepler as of Monday morning. That marked a sharp increase from the previous week, when just 19 vessels crossed, the lowest weekly figure since the first U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran on February 28th, which led to widespread disruption of traffic through the strait.
On the Hormuz thread we left open Monday, France 24, citing Kepler data, says 55 commodity vessels crossed the strait between May 11th and 17th, up from 19 the week before, which was the wartime low. So traffic wasn't still sliding. It was moving the other way.
55 vessels is basically the wartime average now, per Kepler's own numbers since March 1st. So yeah, that's recovery back to wartime normal, not some big breakout. And I still want to know what Lloyd's war risk desks are charging, because edging higher doesn't pay the premiums.
Iranian state television said Friday, the Revolutionary Guards are allowing more ships to transit. That's Tehran's framing, through Tehran's broadcaster. An IRGC announcement that it's permitting passage is not the same thing as passage being unrestricted. From Yahoo News.
Iran targeted numerous countries in the region, including the UAE, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Oman, and Iraq. U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, played a role in regional air defense that helped intercept more than 6,000 one-way attack drones and over 1,500 ballistic missiles aimed at U.S. forces, Israel, and Arab partners during the recent Iran conflict.
CENTCOM's Admiral Brad Cooper told Al Arabiya his command intercepted more than 6,000 attack drones and more than 1,500 ballistic missiles during the Iran conflict. And he said Iran's military capabilities have been, quote, destroyed. That's a named source and a specific number. So put it next to the other named source, the May 14th intelligence assessment, as reported by the NYT, saying 30 of 33 Hormuz missile sites were back online and 70% of Iran's stockpile was still intact. Both of those can't be the operating truth at once.
And notice where the victory lap is going. Al Arabiya, a regional Arabic outlet, not a U.S. wire. Cooper is basically telling the Gulf states, your air defense umbrella worked. We're the anchor. Stay close. That's a posture message dressed up like a battlefield debrief.
The MEAD CDOC network, the Middle East Air Defense Coordination Cell, is what Cooper says made that interception scale possible, and he's calling it the largest integrated air defense umbrella ever fielded. That's a real institutional claim on the record. The numbers behind it still need independent corroboration, but the network itself is now out there as an actual structure.
6,000 drones is an extraordinary number. I'll give Cooper that. But if Energy Secretary Wright is also testifying that Iran is frighteningly close on the nuclear track, then those two clocks are still running in opposite directions, and nobody at the podium is reconciling them.
Al Arabiya writes,
The U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, confirmed that it is enforcing a blockade on Iran because Tehran has used the Strait of Hormuz as a weapon to threaten freedom of navigation, adding that U.S. forces are prepared for any contingency plans that may be required in the region.
CENTCOM Captain Tim Hawkins told Al Arabiya, in what the outlet is calling an exclusive, that U.S. forces have redirected more than 80 ships since the blockade on Iran began, and that Washington is monitoring everything moving in and out. That's the named source and the specific number. And it does update our Hormuz blockade thread from last week.
That destroyed Iran's military capabilities line is doing a lot of work, except 2 weeks ago the same command was looking at 30 of 33 Hormuz missile sites back online and a 70% stockpile intact, per the NYT read of the classified assessment. CENTCOM doesn't get to run a victory lap to Al Arabiya and then footnote it with, "But the missiles are mostly fine."
To put that cleanly, the May 14th intelligence assessment said 70% of Iran's missile stockpile remained intact. Today's Hawkins interview says the capabilities are destroyed. Those are two U.S.-side institutional claims, and nobody has reconciled them publicly. So both stay on the board as claims, not conclusions.
And why Al Arabiya? If you genuinely destroyed a regional adversary's military, you'd give that interview to Reuters or the Pentagon press corps, where follow-up questions exist. You give it to a Gulf-facing Arabic outlet when the message is for Tehran and Riyadh, not for the record.
Here's AP 7 a.m.
The United States has agreed to waive Iran's oil sanctions during negotiations, Iranian media claimed on Monday, citing sources. According to Iran's semi-official Tasnim news agency, the waiver by the U.S. means temporary relinquishment of sanctions, while Iran insists on the removal of all sanctions against the country as part of the U.S. commitments.
The Tasnim agency, Iran's semi-official wire, is reporting that Washington has agreed to temporarily waive OFAC oil sanctions during negotiations, citing unnamed sources. That's the sourcing. One side, no name, semi-official outlet. The U.S. has not confirmed it.
And Tehran knows exactly what it's doing by dropping this through Tasnim, instead of waiting for a joint statement. A temporary OFAC waiver until a final deal is the opposite of what Washington has publicly said it wants. Maximum pressure stays on until ink is dry. If this is real, somebody in the administration blinked, and Iranian media is the one announcing it.
There's also a structural gap hiding inside that claim. Tehran is framing the waiver as a step toward full sanctions removal, which is its stated condition. Washington's proposal, per Tasnim, is a temporary OFAC suspension pending a final understanding. Those aren't the same thing, and the 14-point exchange through Pakistan's mediator suggests both sides know it isn't settled.
Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson also said the same day that uranium enrichment is non-negotiable under the NPT, responding directly to Trump's 20-year suspension proposal. So Iranian media is claiming a U.S. economic concession, while Iranian officials are publicly rejecting the core U.S. nuclear ask. That's not one de-escalation cluster. It's two tracks moving in opposite directions at the same time.
Here's Iran International.
Shahab Dalili, a former captain of Iran Shipping Company and a U.S. resident held in Iran since 2016, returned home to his family after his release from Iranian detention, Hostage Aid Worldwide said on Tuesday. After a long journey from Evin to Yerevan to D.C., we joyfully announced that Shahab Dalili is finally home safe with his family after a decade-plus of wrongful detention in Iran, the group said in a post on X.
Shahab Dalili, former captain with Iran Shipping Company, U.S. resident, arrested in Tehran in 2016 while attending his father's funeral, is home, according to Hostage Aid Worldwide, which tracked his route from Evin prison to Yerevan to Washington. Iran International is the source. That's a named individual, a named route, and a named advocacy group confirming it.
A decade in Evin for going to a funeral, and he lands on the same day Tehran's semi-official wire is claiming the U.S. agreed to waive oil sanctions. I'm not saying those two facts are connected. I'm saying somebody wants them to look connected.
That's the exact question. The May 18th thread on whether individual releases were continuing alongside crew returns. Dalili closes one named case there. Whether his release is a coordinated goodwill signal timed to the sanctions-waiver story, or just a separate development that hit the same morning, is still unanswered by the record. Have feedback, story ideas, or a correction for Iran War Daily? Send us a note at iranwardaily@lanternpodcast.com. We read every message, and your tips help shape the briefing. We've put links to every story we discussed in the show notes, so if something caught your attention, you can follow it there and read more. That's Iran War Daily for this Tuesday, May 19th. Thanks for listening. This is a Lantern Podcast.